I'm often asked, when are we as a mod team going to put our own video game out? And while there are a bunch of mods which turned into great standalone games like PUBG, Dota, and DayZ, and probably even some games people refer to with whole words instead of just letters, today we're going to talk about when modders made a standalone game which very much did not turn out to be great. Voltox The AI War. If you look really closely at this menu, you may be able to see some similarities between it and Star Wars Empire at War. That's because this game was actually made by some former Empire at War modders, buying the rights to use the GlyphX engine from Empire at War's developers and then making it worse. I normally try to be nice, and I'd love if there were something nice to say about this, but honestly, I'd actually feel bad if anyone went out and spent the $30 Canadian or less in real money on this. The game is available in early access on Steam and has been since 2015 without any updates. The game advertises 2 playable fractions, but unfortunately only one half of those are available at all, since you can only play through the early access Galactic Conquest map as a faction called the Shangri-La, which changes its spelling in I think every single text entry in the game. You also can't change the difficulty, which I was a bit concerned and confused by at first, but then realized later on it was okay because despite being called the AI Wars, all of the AI took the day off. Whether you're on the tactical or galactic map, the enemy forces don't move or do really anything at all beyond shoot back at you if you happen to be in range. You're greeted on the galactic map by a servant explaining some lore stuff, including the sad fact that 73% of your fleet was lost. This servant, I think, shows where most of the budget of this game probably went, since the ship models and designs aren't really great even by Empire at War mod standards of the time, but for some reason the developers, Hyperdrive Games, seem to have some really high detail models of largely scantily clad women wearing chokers, including this one on the welcome image from their Facebook page, which as far as I can tell has nothing to do with anything in the game. I'm sure the chokers and the straps are very important to the plot or something, but considering there'll probably never be a full release of the game, we're never going to find out why. After doing some of the research in the game, you get a character named Thanet Solus as a hero unit, and while she's absolutely useless in combat, her description talks about her being an AI altered by her master to, quote, always be bound to him, loyal no matter what might happen, end quote. So I can only assume no women were ever anywhere near the creation of this game. Her introduction dialogue also made me want to die of secondhand embarrassment to read on stream, and it unironically involved writing out ha 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 with 5 ha's, and just about every sexy space AI trope from the last 20 years that you can think of. I pretty quickly jumped into the first battle where I saw a map that, little did I know, I'd be seeing at basically every single other planet for the rest of the campaign. I've played a lot of Empire at War, so I thought I knew what to expect. There were a lot of issues with missing text though, which was kind of disappointing considering there really isn't that much content to write text for, especially when it comes to simple, important things like hardpoints, so you can at least know what your ships are going to do. I was playing in English and developers are German though, so that may factor in. The reinforcement prevention area where you're trying to drag in new ships was missing a texture, so that was just a giant grey blob, and I don't think that has anything to do with localization settings. In the first big engine upgrade they made to the source code though, when you try to bring a unit in, it doesn't display where you're trying to put it. Instead, it renders at the origin point of the map, so it's never really clear if it's going to work or not when you're trying to place them. This is where I started to realize the AI wasn't doing anything either. It turned out they did leave on some debugging, so if you look in the games folder, you can see an AI error log that just has the exact same error related to, I think, ground combat for the entire length of my play session. Which makes sense that there'd be an error for that because there's no ground combat in the game. Honestly, my whole time playing, I couldn't figure out any actual improvements they made to the engine, or really any changes at all they made which couldn't have been done in an Empire at War mod, so I started questioning the financial and marketing decisions involved in splitting this off as its own game before building a fan base for a new IP as a mod. The developers of this game had been working on a pretty popular Empire at War mod before they split off to make the game, so I do think the limited support for this game from either Steam purchases or backers, which I assume is what resulted in it being abandoned, shows how risky it is for mod developers to try to branch out and make their own game, especially when they can't use the original IP that made them popular. It's an incredibly risky decision to make. The quality of this battle also made me really start to worry about what the next 2 hours of my life were going to look like. I know this is only early access, but the early access page says this was 2 years in, and anticipated only 6 to 9 months until a full release, so I really don't know what any of that time went into, or how they thought they'd finish everything else in the next 6 months. On the other hand, all of my feared trepidation and disappointment disappeared when I won the battle and a big missing appeared, which I found hilarious, and it solidified this as Game of the Year for me. There's really not much to show for the rest of the actual gameplay. The tactical battles had the exact same map for basically every planet, and 2 to 3 different arrangements of also not moving ship types, aside from one specific type of boss ship, which I think was meant to be humanity's first faster-than-light ship. The game mentions Earth and Mars, with the Galactic Conquest map taking place in a solar system where Sol is in the middle, but there's no Earth and no Mars on the map, so I think it's in a different system and they just didn't realize what Sol meant. There's not all that much to do on the Galactic map either, but I was determined to find anything that was there, which is unfortunate because you can only build structures at a planet when you have this one specific hero ship there, so I mostly just sat around and waited for things to finish building, one planet at a time, half disappointed that I wasn't finding anything, and half relieved that the game had absolutely no AI, so I didn't have to worry about getting attacked while this was going on. A couple times I just walked away to go and check on my fridge. An early hint mentioned solving the mysteries of the Eidolon system, so I thought we were going to get some kind of big scripted battle, or there'd at least be some story content at the game. But as far as I can tell, the only mystery to be solved is whether they'd have been allowed to use the name Shangri-La legally, and whether I'd accidentally wandered into someone's softcore BDSM fantasy world. I don't want to be negative about stuff, but where there's a lot of games out there where someone may get something out of it, I can't stress enough that you should not spend $30 on this game. It quite honestly should not be available on Steam at all. I could see it maybe being an acceptable early access release if there were quick follow-up releases building on and polishing what's there, but there just weren't. All it might do is trick some Empire at War fans into paying for a game they think is going to fix some of the issues with Empire at War if they don't realize how long ago this was put in early access. And I really don't want to be responsible for that happening to anyone. But there you have it, making your own game is a frightening prospect, not least of which because some douchebag Canadian might make a video calling it bad 10 years later. And even for popular Empire at War mod developers, making a new game, even on a familiar engine, isn't a guarantee that your fan base will support your next endeavors. So I'm going to go back into the Star Wars mines to continue making risk-free mods. I also may go cry now.